Welcome to Innovating Leadership, Co-Creating Our Future. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf, CEO and founder of the Innovative Leadership Institute. In today's episode, we're joined by two global voices shaping the future of our cities. Nikki Greenberg, a futurist and urban strategist driving transformation on the ground, and Ugo Valenti, managing director of Smart City Expo World Conference, a convener of global urban innovation. Together, Nikki and Ugo bring complementary perspectives on how leaders, whether in government, business, or civil society, can navigate the changes of AI, climate change, and global uncertainty while building resilient, thriving cities. Their insights aren't just for city planners, they're for anyone who leads in a world increasingly shaped by urban dynamics. Ugo and Nikki, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Pleasure.
Cities are hubs of innovation, commerce, and culture. Why should businesses and organization leaders, beyond city officials, care deeply about how cities are led and designed?
It's in the name CBD, Central Business District. And this is the thing, is that cities are centers of knowledge and business and culture and arts. And that's where we just have this density of people. So it's no mistake that businesses tend to locate themselves in cities. They are designed for it. They have great transportation links, which means that you can bring in talent from a few different directions. You have the arts, you have restaurants, you have all the amenities that you need. And I think just like if you want to just take a step back and think about something quite tangible in this regard, even if we look at the return to office after the pandemic and how a lot of business leaders, they really wanted to get their people back into the office, back having that sense of community, people looked at, well, what are they actually coming back to? Because it's more than just the building. It's more than just your colleagues. It's also the surrounds. It's, are there great places for lunch? Is it easy to get in? What's the commute like? Is it safe? So there's this direct tie-in between, city innovation, talent, and the office life, the street life. It's all interconnected.
Cities are basically where everything converges, right? So innovation, business, culture, and also human aspiration. So we need to bear in mind that right now, 80% of the GDP is created and being generated in cities, right? So that means that when cities work well, business thrive as well, right? And when cities fail, being housing or mobility on sustainability collapse, then the private sector also suffers, right? So cities are basically these living ecosystems where everything is interconnected.
I'm living in Columbus, Ohio, and our biggest challenge to expanding our workforce is housing and affordable housing. That's a city concern. Not fixed solely by the private sector. It's zoning, construction, utilities, the whole gamut. And at the point where we can't attract labor, we can't expand.
It's about systems also. And interestingly enough, despite the accent, I live in New York City. And I was riding the subway yesterday. And there were these two young guys, and they had a shopping bag with some placards in it. So I said to one of the guys, I was like, I hope you don't mind my asking, but what are these placards? And he's like, oh, we were just at a protest for REBNY, which is the Real Estate Board of New York, who, represent the real estate community. I'm like, well, I didn't tell him who I was, by the way. I was like, oh, but why would you protest against them? And he's like, well, they represent developers, and developers are bad for the city. They're driving up housing. I was like, well, why do you think that? And we had this discussion. And one of the things is, to your point, a lot of cities around the world are having this problem around affordable housing. If there's not affordable housing or workforce housing, it's hard for people to actually have a comfortable lifestyle. And part of that really ties into regulation and that red tape to be able to, create new places, to create new spaces. I read an article recently that said it's around 25% of a project's cost is just in red tape. It's just in approvals and permits. That doesn't really add, a sense of being to a place. So the more that we can streamline, building systems, having this great relationship between, the public sector, private sector, et cetera, then we can actually help solve some of the challenges around affordability which, ties into business and lifestyle and all the things that you just mentioned.
I was reading something this morning, and I'm not going to remember the source, but the city of New York is trying to raise a large number. I want to say $65 billion.
I think it's 650 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. $650 million for food banks to ensure that hungry people in New York are fed. So it really points to the range of services and the importance of well-run cities.
Sometimes you need to have the mayor of the city, the mayors of the city, really taking decisions over how do they design this city. And we were discussing about housing previously. Let me put an example of the city of Vienna in Austria. Right now, Vienna is one of the most livable cities on earth, and it's not by chance, but it's really by leadership design, right? So for over a century, the city has invested in affordable housing, right? And these public-private partnerships. So right now, today, 60% of Vienna's people, the residents, they live in city-supported housing, right? And where they combine these different quality and designs, but taking into account the social inclusion for that. And developers who access these city lands, they must build at least 50% for social and affordable housing. So this is an example of how you can design your city to be truly inclusive and to try to shorten the gap that happens in other places of the world.
That's really interesting. And just as a benchmark, it's about 10% in other places. So for them to have it at 50% is impressive. And
Exactly.
I'm always amazed when a place with a cold climate gets the title of one of the most livable cities or best cities in the world. I'm like, well, as an Australian, I'm like, it's not the weather that's doing it. What else are you doing so well? So, kudos to the Viennese. Maybe it's the bakeries too.
As cities face pressures from climate change, AI, and shifting demographics, what leadership qualities are most essential for guiding transformation across the range of sectors that cities need to navigate?
Leaders today need to have these, let's say, three qualities. One is vision and collaboration, and also today, courage. And the vision is because the city leaders need to see beyond the election cycles, which is not easy to do, but it's a must, because otherwise it's just a cycle of 4 to 5 years, depending on the countries, is a very short cycle, right? And then they need to be able to collaborate, because they need to be able to connect different ecosystems together, because they need to connect the public, the private, the academic, the civic ecosystems together. And finally, it's they need this courage, because they need to take decisions that might be unpopular, but in the end they're essential for the day of tomorrow, right? So it's about creating these conditions that allow for innovation, right, and not just managing resources. Here in Barcelona, we have an important examples. There was a huge backlash from the locals when the previous mayor decided to create a train, let's say, a train that connected the whole city all around. Because until the train is done, that means that the city, from a transport perspective, is like cut in half, right? And there are plenty of. But when the train is finished, the whole layout of the city and the whole landscape of the city will change for the better. So sometimes you need to take this type of decisions that are unpopular at one moment in time, but they are partly needed for the let's say for the survival or the growth of the city in the near future.
And that ties directly to what Nikki just said about the protesters in New York.
I love everything you had to say, because I've got principles that come from a slightly different perspective, because I sit in the private sector. And the three terms are very close to yours, Ugo, are, a sense of flexibility, because we don't know what's coming next, especially as there are different types of emerging technologies. People's attitudes and values also change. New York, for example, used to be, very much leaning in one direction, and now it's kind of like a smattering of different social values, for example, even in terms of fixed infrastructure. you don't know what we necessarily need later on. So a sense of flexibility, I believe, is important in a mindset. I'm going to come back to your train example in a minute. The second thing I believe that leaders need is curiosity. And just kind of realizing that what's always worked doesn't necessarily work in this moment in time. And we've always heard this, this adage saying, well, we tried it before, it didn't work. Well, guess what? Yesterday was a very different time to today. Like when you tried this out, did you have AI like we do today? Did you have the same talent? Did you have the same environment? So there needs to be the sense of curiosity. And the third one I kind of put in a slightly different category, but very much aligned with what Ugo has said, is I think you need to actually embody the willingness to be a visionary. And to his point, it's very hard to do things that might be somewhat unpopular or to take a stance that might be a bit different. And you're pushing this boulder up the hill. However, the example I'd actually like to give is there's the, incredibly famous architect called Frank Lloyd Wright, an American architect. He designed the Guggenheim Museum. He's known for the Prairie style, absolutely brilliant and prolific. And he designed a city called Broadacre City in the 1930s. And one of the things that he did when he designed Broadacre City is that he was absolutely enamored with technology. And in the 1930s, kind of the new, like the hottest thing at the moment was the automobile. So when he designed Broadacre City, he actually lent into designing it around this emerging technology of the automobile, having freeways and multi-level car parks and all of that. And he didn't just stop there, but he also designed it that it had drones in the air of his different diagrams. This is the 1930s. So Frank Lloyd Wright, he's somebody that for all architecture students, all urbanists, all city planners, etc., he's a household name. And the reason that he was able to have this legacy as being, quite literally the greatest of all time, not arguably, but literally the greatest of all time, is that he really took these chances but went beyond it. And I think to be an effective leader, you can't just think about what's happening today and how to be effective today. You have to think 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years into the future and take those chances for that long-term planning like they are for this new rail in Barcelona and beyond.
We were at Amazon last week for their Delivering the Future Summit, and they were talking specifically about sustainability in water and power with all of the data centers and AI, and how our cities, knowing what we know only today, and we assume that's going to change dramatically in the next 5 years, how are we generating power and sustaining a clean environment for what we're going to need, assuming we continue on the AI path at least the pace we are now? How are we managing water? Where will people live? How will AI impact the return to the office and work from anywhere and digital nomads? With climate pressure, the displacement of people is going to be dramatic. It seems like right now, for city leaders especially, but also for corporate leaders who are trying to figure out where to locate their facilities, this is a really pressing question. And for any employee who's considering relocating, like, where do I want to invest in property, or do I rent? Which ripples through the system of developers and affordable housing and public transit. Are people continuing to live in cities, and what transit do we need?
There's so many great thoughts that came through your mind that I loved hearing about. And while you were talking, something that kind of stuck out to me a little bit is that this isn't a new frontier. It's almost like the gold rush. And that towns were created because of the gold rush, because of gold mining. And then you have this industry, this infrastructure, and then you have informal settlements around, and then it becomes something. And with AI data centers, hyperscalers, etc., the big thing, as you mentioned, is really around power. And the existing grid isn't sufficient to support what's there. And there are technologies now or the claim at least is that within 8 years, you can put up a new nuclear power plant. And there are companies like Microsoft and others that have net zero objectives that they need to meet, which means that they are also looking at sustainable measures such as solar, wind, etc., to have as backup power for their data centers. So what you start to get is almost like this, this pin drop of an industry. What is our need? It's like, okay, we need. It's like playing SimCity, right? It's like saying, okay, we want to have this AI. Hyperscaler data center. Therefore, we need power. Therefore, we need homes. Oh, we're going to have homes, but guess what? We need to have schools. If we're going to have schools, we also need a police station, etc. And that's how things, kind of pop up. But more than anything, looking at this new industry, the public sector, the private sector, etc., they're really looking at where do we have resources and making sure that we're managing them in the right way. And to your point, we can't have one without the other. We can't have development without thinking about the ramifications and the negative implications of what's going to happen, because just uncontrolled growth for any reason. So it's a challenge, but it's not a new challenge. It's an age-old challenge which opens up new opportunities for different markets. We're not putting hyperscalers in the middle of Central Park in Manhattan. We're putting them out in different communities. So it's great for job growth and other industries, so long as it's managed well.
Yeah, I grew up living right near Reston, Virginia. So one of the first planned communities in that kind of way of a truly integrated city. And it seems like, so aging myself, that was well over 50 years ago. So these kinds of ideas of, and you're pointing back to the 30s with Frank Lloyd Wright. So the idea of planning cities isn't new. The idea of refurbishing even Reston, which was a brilliant city and still is, I don't know how well they are situated for what's coming. I'm not making a commentary about Reston. I don't know. The point is, for people in city leadership, this is, even for the most consciously designed cities, the evolution is crucial.
I am a huge believer on the human ability to innovate constantly. So let me put another example. It's not North American, but I believe it's a very good example. Medellin. Medellin in Colombia was a city that was best known for Pablo Escobar and drug dealership than being an innovative city. But Medellin made a huge change. They had this hill, let's say this mountain, and they had the people that lived in the lower part of the city and the people that lived in the higher part of the city, and they were not connected at all. But they created this metro cable line, and prior to that, it took more than 1 hour to get to one part to another. And after creating this metro line, this metro cable, they call it metro cable, in just 10 minutes they could be in another part of the city, and then a huge new sea of opportunities arose in Medellin. These people got to have new jobs, and the whole city was interconnected. And Medellin, actually, in the 2014 or 2015, I believe, was mentioned as the most innovative city in the world. So there are wonderful opportunities to change the whole landscape of a city by being smart. And I'm not talking about applying the wonderful new technologies that we have. I'm talking about just changing the design and how to apply on cities. So I'm pretty positive. I'm optimist by nature, but I'm pretty positive that, of course, there will be huge new challenges that we will face. But I'm pretty sure that we are very adaptable. The human is very adaptable, and we will find ways to innovate and to be able to overcome all of these challenges.
So, Ugo, I want to build on that statement. We haven't talked about what the Smart City World Congress does, and leveraging that with the question, how do innovations in one city influence others? And also, how can business leaders learn from this idea of cross-pollination?
What we do at the event, the Smart City Expo Congress, is basically a worldwide event where we bring over almost 1,000 cities from all over the world, as well as over 1,200 exhibitors from all over the world as well. So there's this huge, as you mentioned, this cross-pollination of both cultures, innovations, and best practices that are shared together. So this creates a wonderful opportunity for a city from Asia to showcase what they're doing to a city from the United States, or a city from Latin America, or a city from Europe, right? And at the same time, this creates a wonderful opportunities for a US company to sell their solutions to other places in the world. So we are this platform that connects and ties up everything together. And of course, we have a wonderful conference headlined by Nikki in this in this edition of the event, but with the best speakers in the world in relation to urban innovation, and this is wonderful because this creates a platform where we can showcase things that are happening on a city that are working very well. And let me be very brief with this example, but I want to explain this because there's this grid of 3x3 streets here in Barcelona that we call supergrid. The outer part of the 3x3 streets is used for traffic flow, and the inner part of the streets is just used for pedestrian use or cycling use, right? This was created like, I don't know, maybe 5-7 years ago. It's called super blocks, superillas in Spanish. And this has changed the whole layout of all the areas in which this solution has been applied, right? So the quality of noise and air has increased by 25% on those areas. The space, the inner space, has been reused for pedestrian use, for greener use. There are more shops, there are more bars, more restaurants, more locals. All of the locals and tourists are going through the streets. The regeneration of that area has increased quite a lot. So it's wonderful, and there's no technology applied here. And what I wanted to mention here is that this solution is basically exactly what you can see today in Times Square in New York City. I remember in Times Square in New York City, when I was there, like, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, it was basically, there were plenty of cars. Right now, it's a pedestrian area. It is completely revitalized, and it's not only Times Square, I'm aware of that, but it's plenty of areas. So this showcases that one solution applied on one city of the world is replicable. Of course, it needs to be adapted to the culture and to the reality, but in another city of the world. And if it happens in Barcelona, New York City, it can happen in Rome, it can happen in Shanghai, and it can happen in Delhi. That's what we do, yeah.
Beautiful. Nikki, I want to jump to you now. You often talk about human-centric design, which leverages what Ugo just mentioned. How can leaders balance technology advancements that we're talking about with AI and different technologies within cities with livability? And why is this balance crucial to long-term business success?
I love the meatiness of this question, and this is very much the intersection where I sit between built world design, technology, and business. My background is I'm an architect that went to business school, which is almost unheard of. It's like, why? Like, why is it, so this is the thing, and I kind of dumb things down a little bit, and I apologize to AI in advance for doing this, but AI is just a better technology. That's really all it is. And when we look at tech and we think, well, what should we be doing with AI, et cetera? It's like, well, actually, it just means that the technology we've been using has gotten better. And a lot of the things that we used to do, like long workarounds for, now I can do it actually in a lot more of an efficient way. So there's this beautiful synergy between using advanced technologies and finding efficiencies, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector. And, there's this one example that I love. I'll give a public sector example where I believe it was the city of Detroit. What they did is they applied AI to their snowplows. It's like, okay, so what? So you know how when you have Waymo, it will find the best route, will find the optimal route, and same as when you have your Lyft or your Uber or whatever, same thing, it finds the optimal route. What these snowplows can do is they can actually figure out using AI which are the routes that it should be clearing first when there's a snowstorm, and do the main roads first. Where does there tend to be pile on the most? Actually using this data to be more efficient about its routes What it ultimately meant is that by having the same number of snowplows, they could cover a lot more ground, which essentially meant that it brought the cost down of their equipment. I'm like, hooray, that all sounds wonderful. So, and it just meant that also like the wonderful people that were operating the snowplows, that, their time is pretty valuable. There's not many of them, that they could actually be put to their highest and best use, being on the job and making the most impact. In the private sector, there's this emerging discipline called digital master planning. And I had the great opportunity to run a pilot project within this, about a couple of years ago. And what digital master planning is designing the digital experience through the lens of an individual. So, what does that mean? So, it means that if, say, we have an office building, the way that a worker uses the building versus a caterer versus, say, a repair person, they're all navigating the building in different ways. And digital master planning is akin to thinking about, in tech, we have, UX design, user experience design, that can actually start thinking about, well, how can you optimize that journey for a person through this building in the best way that it's, that is efficient, it's, easy for them. And you're kind of looking at every single touch point. So there's starting to be within within both the public sector and the private sector, this greater, recognition around how we can use technology both for efficiency, but also for optimizing the use of labor and also for improving the human experience. And I could go on about this for hours on end, but needless to say that, amongst professionals, there's more of a recognition about how we bring all of these elements together.
Nikki, as a futurist, do you have a sense of, as we think of AI and climate change and whatever is next, as we're talking carbon neutral, in some, even though the US may be pushing back, companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google are making these big commitments. Do you have a sense of what cities will look like 10 years from now? Are we moving to people still being back in the office, or are we looking at some more geographically dispersed orientation?
Cities are very slow to evolve. And sometimes they might have a little bump, a little glitch, and then they keep going on their merry way, as we saw in the pandemic. And again, for me, sitting in New York City, New York looks pretty similar to how it was in 2019. And even though we had the glitch with the office market, now we're getting new headlines saying, record occupancy and record, um, you know, um, rent rolls are being, like things kind of bounce back. So it's more about these longer term trends that we look towards. You mentioned things around sustainability, and I'd love to for Ugo to talk to some of these examples too. But Europe is really taking a leading role there around circular economy to make sure that
Hmm.
they're getting more electric cars, having less traffic, thinking about the way that we use materials in a way that's effective and efficient and not so wasteful. Um, working in the office in 10 years' time, yeah, we'll still have people working in the office. We'll have people working in remote. We'll probably still be having webinars about, return to office and, when's that going to happen, etc. So, so change is slow, but ultimately, because of the new technologies that are coming out and constantly evolving and opening up new opportunities for us, we'll start to see kind of this like, gradual change towards, things that are already happening in larger quantities, I suppose. But I wouldn't say there's anything dramatic there. But as we were discussing before, there's still the opportunity for cities that aren't London, New York, Tokyo, etc., to also have quite thriving communities, especially around new industries, new hubs. And as long as they have those great lifestyle attributes, then they become great business attractors. Because you can be anywhere when you're working remote.
I actually contributed to, or wrote a book chapter, co-wrote a chapter in a book on circular economy funded by the German government and co-authored with someone from the Netherlands. And so our chapter was on leadership, but it did look at circularity through the range of aspects of the product life cycle and organizational life cycle. So I appreciate your bringing that up because it does seem like that's another variable in the equation of how do we live going forward.
You had this question: how do we see cities 10 years from now? And of course, as Nikki was saying, there might be plenty of trends, but there is one trend that I truly see, and it's I see them greener than today. It's I believe this trend is almost unstoppable in this sense, and every right now you know that most cities, for instance, in the States were designed mostly for the use of cars, but that's something that we all know it's going to change, and it needs to change somehow. So I wanted to put the example in Copenhagen right now. I know they are very far ahead of the rest of the world, but right now 50% of people in Copenhagen go to work by bike. Right now they move basically by bike, and what they're doing is they're understanding how they can become smarter in the sense that how can they improve the rides by bike by 10 or 20%, and how they can even increase up to 75% the use of bikes in the city, right, by 2030 more or less. So I believe this is a trend that it's an ongoing trend, and even if you get to see the 5-year plan that China has just launched and established, they are talking about having a greener China and improving the use of green energies, and also make cities more green. Right now, a city that is more or less designed by from the ground up, like is Shenzhen, 50% of the landscape is already green. So they're taking that into account at a huge effort, right? So I believe Europe might be leading, the north of Europe might be leading the way, but I believe the whole world is gonna follow up on that.
So when you say green, I just want to clarify that's not only green energy, but
No.
also more landscape plants.
Green spaces, exactly. It's this is something typical here in Europe. You know that we have very walkable areas, right? When there is green on the street, in the summertime the temperature is more or less bearable. If it's or only concrete, it's almost impossible to walk around. It's because the temperature of the floor is so high that you cannot you cannot even go out. So I'm not talking only about the use of green energies, but I'm really talking about the use of green in the spaces, in the buildings. Yeah.
Beautiful. And Nikki, please jump in.
I might add another green into it, and it's Greenville, South Carolina. I was there last week, and I think one of the things is that when we look at the European context versus the US context, it's quite different. And Maureen being and Dan being in the US, I think there's a little bit of that might work in Europe, but not necessarily all through the US. US is depending on where you are, can be very, very car reliant. And when I'm in Boise, Idaho, you need a car. And that's not about to change anytime soon. It's a very different context. So Greenville, South Carolina, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous place. And because this is what I do, I read through their 2040 strategy. And a little bit of what Ugo is talking about, one of their core pillars, they have 3 core pillars, is around having I believe it's 65% green space. So maintaining the landscape, because they know that is the attractor. That's what makes their community so special. And what they're doing is that when it comes to development, it's called inwards and upwards. So it means that where there is already development, they're redeveloping that and they're building taller so that they can preserve the landscape. A second principle of theirs was around, affordable housing. So I think they took it from, I think it was 8.5% to 10%. And then the third pillar was around mobility and transportation. Now, and I said I'd come back to this when Ugo was talking about the trains, and this is where I kind of fall in love, this is where I fall in love with emerging technologies and smart cities. This sounds so basic, but I think it's one of the most amazing things. And I know there'll probably be a transport planner coming over and saying, Nikki, you've got it wrong, but hear me out. So autonomous shuttles have great possibilities. So think of a van where you can put 6 people in and away it goes. And one of the nicknames that they have is a trackless tram, because what you can do is instead of putting in fixed infrastructure for a new train line, instead you can have a road and then you can train all of these little shuttles to go along that route time after time after time. So that speed to be able to be operational is so much faster. And when you need to increase capacity, guess what? You bring more of these little vans along. If you have a special event or if there's a detour, you can move them around. And I think to me, this is kind of what the power of smart cities is. It's that understanding that there is the way that's always worked, but there's also emerging technologies that can actually bring efficiencies and operational advantages to things. So yeah, that's my plug for, trackless trams, driverless shuttles.
That solves such a big problem. I grew up in the DC area, worked in Crystal City, and my commute was about an hour. Parking was expensive for an entry level person, so I did this kind of ride sharing thing. But the ride sharing thing only worked if you didn't have to work overtime. If you had to work overtime, there was no opportunity to get home, and sleeping in the office wasn't a good option. So as my career developed with my next employer, I asked about ride sharing, and they basically said, we pay you enough money to have a car. So if we want you to work overtime, you will work overtime. And so this idea and we weren't on a bus line, which answers the why you could have just taken a bus. The trackless trams solve that problem if they come with certain regularity and doesn't require the economics of installing another bus line if there aren't sufficient riders to make that an economic option.
Yeah, but here is where bus on demand, for instance, enters the race. It's the regular problem is that when you're thinking about the bus line, you have these regular stops. So you know that every, I don't know, 20 minutes you will have a bus coming over and doing this exact same line, whether there's a person there or many people or not. But you can apply bus on demand. It only needs some, the software applications. It's very basic. And if there's I don't know, maybe 2-3 people that are ordering the bus just comes and takes you home. It's as simple as, in some cases, it might be as simple as that.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's jump to then future-proofing leadership. What should leaders, whether in cities or companies, be doing today to prepare for the urban realities of 2030 and beyond?
It's the quote unquote futurist. I think the thing is, and it comes back to some of the principles that both Ugo and I tended to share a perspective on, is that you have to be willing to think big and you have to understand that the world around us has changed and there are new technologies. There's this younger generation coming in that have grown up with TikTok and iPhones and all the rest, and that's the reality that they know. So as leaders, we actually do have an obligation to make sure that both our places and organizations are future ready. And if we want to look at this in kind of a practical tip kind of term, Dirk Bakker, who's the CEO of Collier's Netherlands, for example, I had a great conversation with him. And one of the things that, he's a very experienced senior leader, which means that he has white hair. Wonderful man. And which, love it. And what he said to me is that he realized that about a third of the people in his office were under 35. And he kind of said, well, look, they represent our clientele and the next generation. Why don't they have a seat at the table? And he started what he calls the Young Sounding Board, which is a board of young employees who have the same responsibilities as a traditional board, except for financial responsibilities. And in that way, they were giving real opportunities, real voices to younger employees to shape the organization. And I think it's initiatives like this that we need to remember that in the same way as we talk about diversity in different ways around, race and gender and all, neurodiversity, etc. We also need to realize that, that generational diversity is also another lens through which we need to coexist and have represented at the table to get those different perspectives. So that would be my tangible tip, you could say.
We're having a world that is not only complicated, but it's getting complex. So, so it's not only about thinking strategically, but really thinking about systemically. It's the right word. I'm sorry for. It's systemically, right? It's a different way of understanding how to deal with complex problem solving. This is what's going to happen in the near future. Yeah.
Well, and your organization is brilliant in helping bring that about.
That's what we try to achieve. It's we have all these different initiatives and problems on the table, and how can we create this huge network of people that all of us are urban innovators, and how can we work together towards sorting out those problems and basically giving a better quality of life to the citizens of the future. That's the idea.
Can I also maybe piggyback off that idea and this idea of collaboration and sharing, and it goes beyond just even human beings or leaders sharing. It also goes into tech. And one of the examples I can give is around UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, i.e., flying taxis and drones. And in the US, they're starting to, come and be tested. I know it's happening throughout Europe also. And one of the ways that they're actually speeding up their advancement is that they're using data that's been collected from these journeys that have happened in countries like the Middle East. And in China, because these flying vehicles have already tested out these different routes. So coming back to Ugo's point around, collaboration and the importance of that, especially at a forum like his, the ability to share data and information around technologies through, through collaboration or running test projects, pilot projects of new technologies in different parts of the world, that speeds up the rollout in different places. But we have to have those relationships. Otherwise, everyone's kind of starting from, that point zero and trying to do the same thing in their own lane. The more that there's collaboration, it just speeds things up for everyone's betterment.
Beautiful. What a wonderful note to end on as we think about certainly city leaders, but the interdependence between cities, non-government organizations, government organizations, and corporations, that for any of those entities to be healthy, all of them need to be healthy. And the collaboration, as you've mentioned, Nikki and Ugo, that this is your life's work, that bringing together the best thinking across the world and then tailoring it to the locality. So you mentioned Barcelona and Times Square, that kind of collaboration will be crucial as the volume of change just accelerates. And I want to add the kindness, that we are going to have more disruption, and how we reach across our global networks to ensure the health of our population is also going to be crucial. So thank you both for participating. How would our listeners learn more about you and your organizations? Nikki, do you want to start?
Yeah, you can go to my website, www.nikkigreenberg.com. It's all E's in there. Or follow me on LinkedIn. So reach out and let me know what you're working on. I'm always interested in finding out about new innovative projects.
Urge people to go to www.smartcityexpo.com. And I hope they come over to Barcelona. And we do it yearly, so it's fine if they come back in 2026.
Do you have a date for 2026 for those of us who plan further ahead?
I believe it's 3 to 5 November. I don't remember. It's always Tuesdays to Thursdays, so no mistake there.
So come join you next year.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for this opportunity. It's lovely to be here at this podcast, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for a great conversation. I've enjoyed learning from both of you.
Thank you. Oh, and to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your attention and the work you do to improve our cities, our businesses, our nonprofits, our governments, creating a more livable world for all of us. please like us, share us, and follow us.